All right, welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Sunday, July 25th, 2021. Wanted to do a quick show tonight. There's a couple things that I've noticed over the past several weeks. Questions about Grand Solar Minimum. Is it happening? Is it not happening? Just all kinds of weird things lately. People just coming out of the woodwork really asking these questions about, well, I thought Grand Solar Minimum doesn't exist if there's sunspots. And I'm trying to figure out, where are they getting this info? Because I listened to David Dubai and Adapt 2030, and he gives the same explanation of a Grand Solar Minimum as we do. Ice Age Farmer does as well. Lee Wheelbarger does as well. David Birch, the Star Man, of course, he does as well. Many, many others. So I'm trying to figure out, where is this coming from? Where's this coming from? Well, I'll get to that here in a minute. Let's take a look at solar winds right now at 350.1 kilometers per second with a density of 3.6. Still looking at two sunspots, AR 28, 47, and 46. Only a sunspot number of 35. Now, those combined are decent. Those are moderate-sized sunspots, nothing huge. I'd say 2846 is carrying all the weight right now as far as that goes. And you can see that on the SDO as well. That one is in the northern part of our star, just crossing the Earth-facing area. All right, so what is the deal for tonight's show? So this channel has been kind of a rival of the sunspot community for a long time. This person is Dr. Keith Strong. He has a YouTube channel, and he claims to be a solar physicist from the UK. Now, his main job, in my opinion, is basically throw interference and disinformation. I want to read to you here a comment from Patrick Ball. It says, well, the GSM channels out there will say that this is within their predictions of a grand solar minimum. Effects on climate, which is a short, hot summer, but come September, it will cool fast and we will descend quickly into a long, cold winter, which will last until late spring, damaging crop yields. They claim we are now in a grand solar minimum, which will last until the mid-40s. Now, everything in that statement was pretty much correct. The timeline, not everybody agrees on. Some say the 50s, some say 60s and 70s. However, the majority of that was correct, that we are going to see a short, hot summer. That September we'll see things cool and descend into a cold winter and a long winter as well. So here is Dr. Keith Strong's reply. A GSM is when there are no sunspots for decades, like the Maunder minimum. Really? We have a cycle that is barely a year old and that is pumping out sunspots like the sun is not done in 20 years. Say this is within the predictions of grand solar minimum effects on climate. Observing the current climate and saying it is exactly what we predicted is an old trick. No. See, the difference with the old trick is that I didn't say this in April. I said this in January. I said this in December. That if we go off of empirical data, that empirical data will show us that we will see short, hot summers during grand solar minimum and long, colder winters that last into late spring. He goes on to say, I see no such predictions of massive heat waves in North America, Europe, and Asia. That's because heat waves are weather anomalies, Mr. Strong. But that's not your specialty. You're just a solar physicist, right? So what are you doing talking about climate? Because according to you, the sun does not affect the climate. So what do you know? Anyway. Moving on, unprecedented droughts and wildfires, massive ice loss from the polar caps. Are you not... Oh, all right, I'll slow down. He claims there is unprecedented droughts and wildfires, massive ice loss from the polar caps right now. In fact, those... he says these have been forecasted, by the way. They claim we are now in a grand solar minimum, which will last until the mid-2040s. They claimed the same thing 11 years ago and were wrong. I didn't claim it. Lee Wheelbarger didn't claim it. I know that for a fact. Wheelbarger will say he claimed it as early as 2014, but no, 11 years ago. He says here that they have to establish how a reduction in sunspots will reduce TSI by a whopping 0.1% will have any noticeable effect on our climate. The largest estimate is a zero sunspot number lasting 100 years will be at best to offset 10 years of global warming, i.e. make a difference of 0.1 Celsius. Okay, that's what Dr. Strong says. So he is telling you, and people who are new to the topic, that grand solar minimum is where there are no sunspots for decades. And he says he's a solar physicist, folks. Grand solar minimum 101, I'm about to show you right now. For once and for all, we are getting this out of the way, folks. All the questions that you have about solar cycles and grand solar minimums, pay attention.
Thank you for tuning in to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today I would like to discuss 3 of the main solar cycles that we discuss on this channel. There are regular solar cycles, grand solar cycles, and super grand solar cycles. First off, let's explain a solar cycle. The poles of the sun's magnetic field change places each 11-year activity cycle. The north pole becomes the south magnetic pole and vice versa. Thus, the 11-year cycle of the sunspot frequency is actually half of a 22-year solar cycle in which the magnetic field reverses itself repeatedly. Actually, the length of the activity cycle is not exactly 11 years. That's just an average value. Sunspots are regions where the solar magnetic field is very strong. In visible light, sunspots appear darker than their surroundings because they're a few thousand degrees cooler than their surroundings. Near the minimum of a solar cycle, it is rare to see sunspots on the sun, and the spots that do appear are small and short-lived. During the solar maximum, there will be sunspots very visible on the sun almost all the time, and some of those spots will be very large and last several weeks. So we have this 11-year cycle of sunspot frequency. It goes back and forth from maximum to minimum as the magnetic field changes. So what is a grand solar minimum? Well, a grand solar minimum occurs when several of these solar cycles exhibit a lesser than average activity for decades or even...
All right, I messed up that. Sorry.
Centuries. Solar cycle.
Did you hear that? Let's play it back one more time. Very simple. This is the official explanation for grand solar minimums.
Well, a grand solar minimum occurs when several of these solar cycles exhibit a lesser than average activity for decades or even centuries.
Lesser activity for decades or even centuries. Not zero sunspots, not zero solar flares, not zero anything. Lesser than average cycles over decades or even centuries. Let's continue to watch.
Solar cycles will still occur within these grand minimum periods, but at a lower intensity than usual. There has been a lot of correlation with global and climate changes with grand solar minimums. We'll get into that on another video. So what is a super grand solar minimum? In Valentina Zarkova's recent paper, Oscillations of the Baseline of Solar Magnetic Field and Solar Radiance on a Millennial Timescale, she describes a super grand cycle. Let's take a look at the chart in figure 2 in her paper. Breaking it down in the most basic way possible, looking at this chart, you will see all the solar cycles in a 20,000 year summary curve. There's grand cycles of 350 to 400 years of solar activity. There are also indications of super grand cycles marked by the vertical lines on the graph, these black lines. If you look at them very clearly, in each block between these black lines, you will see 5 grand solar minimums. So super grand solar minimums are 2,000 year blocks approximately of even lower solar activity. These solar cycles again are approximately 2,000 to 2,100 years. The minimum of the current super grand solar minimum started around the time right before the Maunder grand minimum. If you go back in history, you will see how prolonged and long that grand minimum was. There's a lot of confusion, and I wanted to make this video specifically to explain to people there are many different cycles, some that overlap, and it can get very confusing. I plan on doing more short videos like this to explain the more technical information in a very layman's way. Hopefully this clarifies the difference between regular solar cycles, grand solar cycles, and super grand cycles. Thank you for tuning into the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Please like and share.
So Mari did a great job explaining the video here on solar cycles, grand solar minimum, grand cycles, and super grand solar minimums. I think the most important thing that she pointed out here in this video was the grand cycles, because let's take a look at this real quick. This graph right here, look at this. This means that if these grand cycles happen every 350 to 415 years, that means we are in line for the next solar cycle, or the next grand solar minimum is scheduled. This is the second grand cycle of this current super grand solar minimum. So this current grand solar minimum should be closer to that of the Maunder minimum, folks. And I can understand and see the correlation myself. Watching this video refreshes things for everyone, but seeing it even clearer now, folks, the Maunder minimum was a super grand cycle. It marked the beginning of a new super grand solar minimum. 350 to 415 years later, we are getting ready to head into the Jack Eddy minimum, which could mimic the low solar activity that we saw for decades during the Maunder minimum. So you see, the disinformation is not coming from within the community. It comes from people who claim to be solar physicists and tell you that man-made global warming is real and that you are to blame, but yet they are completely missing the boat with the definition of a grand solar minimum. His definition is when there are no sunspots for decades, like the Maunder minimum. It doesn't say that about the Maunder minimum. Nowhere does it say there were 0 sunspots. Mari clearly got her information from GSM 101. Look it up, Wikipedia. There's nothing different from the information that we gave you tonight. That is the gospel on grand solar minimums, folks. Now, we are going to deal with how you deal with someone who is challenging your thought process. Here's how you don't deal with your challengers.
Welcome to the 8th episode in my series of It's So Hot That. These are meant to be the antidote to those silly videos you see on YouTube where they cherry pick cold events from around the world to try to prove that the Earth is cooling when in fact it is warming.
So right off the bat, insulting or silly YouTube channels, but yet he's a solar physicist that tells people that a GSM is a period of time where there's no sunspots for decades. Let's listen to what he does. You want to talk about cherry pick? Listen to this.
These are the events that they've missed out. In fact, these are only just some of the events that they missed out. One of the characteristics of a warming planet is that when it rains very heavily. You're going to see several examples of that today.
So last night we did a show where we talked about how UAE scientists are creating clouding seeds with simulated cosmic rays, basically highly charged particles, but simulated, and it causes more rain because of the highly charged particles, which that's what cosmic rays does. This person here is telling you that we're seeing all this rain because of how warm it is.
Mexico, 7 miles of one of the highways there was covered up to 4 feet of mud after a flash flood. 1.5 inches of rain fell in 15 minutes. The storm left over 17,000 people without power.
Okay, so he is naming off. This is why he says we're global warming, and he's giving off things like the storm left 17,000 people without power. Okay, these are the facts. This is his argument, folks. The road is now reopened. This is part of his facts and arguments of global warming is real.
Another area hit with torrential rain was Mumbai in India. They got about 10 inches of rain in a 24-hour period.
We covered that.
There was 25 dead when a wall collapsed on some homes.
Okay.
Many are still missing. Ironically, the storm damaged the local water purification plant, and there is a water shortage in some areas. England is usually famed for its cold, damp weather, so some of us might laugh at what they call a heat wave. But there's one hitting the UK at the moment.
What he's forgetting to mention is that, and talk to David Birch over there on Twitter, he'll tell you, there's a setup at the end of July that doesn't favor warmer temperatures through the month of August. In fact, he fears it could mean a signal to an early ending to summer in the UK, but he conveniently doesn't mention that. And by the way, he's telling the truth about the rain, but he's giving you a report about how many people are dead and people missing and a wall collapsing. This is all part of the fear of climate crisis.
Temperatures of nearly 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 32 degrees centigrade, have been reached in southern England. These temperatures are likely to last for the rest of the week. Now remember, most homes in the UK do not have air conditioning, so this is really a terrible situation for the people there. People are flocking to the beaches to try to stay cool. With hot weather comes fires. The bootleg fire, which is the largest fire so far in the United States, is in southern Oregon, and it exploded to burn over 340,000 acres. That's about 530 square miles or 1,380 square kilometers. So far, only 75 homes have been lost, but it's unlikely to be contained until November.
See, and that is not accurate at all. Where does he even base that prediction? It's already 32% contained now.
When the rains come. It's so intense, it's generating its own weather, including fire tornado.
Again, yes, we know about this. We talked about this, how fires produce its own natural weather. And guess what? A lot of smoke is involved with changing the climate. It's not just this trace gas that you can't see that changes the climate. You visibly have to see so much CO2 into the atmosphere before it finally does change the climate. But it takes quite a bit of smoke for that to happen.
Another place suffering from torrential rain is central China. Over 10,000 people have had to be evacuated from Henan province. So far, 12 have been identified as being dead from the flood caused by record rainfall, and more rain is forecast. A dam was breached in Luoyang City. If you don't like bugs, this story is not for you. Millions of ladybugs have taken over a Russian beach.
Again, this guy here is just a headline reader looking for views, looking for attention. It's so hot, my dog is demanding a bath. I mean, this is poor, dry British humor. It is. I'm sorry, folks. I know I got a lot of friends out there in the UK, but this guy has got the personality of a napkin. I mean, jeez. Warm weather has extended to the mosquito season, reducing breeding season, blah, blah, blah. Again, what does this have to do with your theory that climate change exists because of us and fossil fuels? He talks about 5 heat waves in the northern hemisphere, new all-time records set for Turkey, Japan, and Ulster. Montana reached 110. By the way, these are all weather anomalies, folks. They're not climate change. Siberian, everything is on fire. Worst fires in living memory. Oh, I've got the perfect answer for you, folks. In fact, I hope somebody's invited Dr. Strong to watch this. Solar activity is at a 5-year high. Oh, yeah? Solar activity at a 5-year high? Try 4-year high. Don't rush it. Okay, 77 days without a spotless day. That's very kind of you to remind us, but he's also forgetting to tell people that they are weak and small sunspots. In fact, some of these wouldn't even be counted during the Maunder minimum. So I think it's safe to say that we are a grand solar minimum. If we had the same technology that we had back in the Maunder, we would very much be considering this Maunder minimum type conditions. I guarantee you that. And then what else? This month has had the first X-flare solar cycle 25. It only took 4.5 years. So again, GSM very unlikely. Let's find out why he thinks.
Likely. We can summarize the situation from around the world by looking at the number of new record highs and new record lows. In the last week, there have been 1,244 new daily record highs.
All right.
The Earth.
Let's
It's too hot jokes.
see. This is all a joke.
I try to chuckle at some of them, even though
This
I
is
can't
a joke.
necessarily put them on YouTube.
Remember, he's trying to convince you that burning fossil fuels has caused a climate crisis. But this is a joke to him. He wants to joke about it. He thinks it's funny. Here's the correct answer to these outrageous and baseless claims. He shows no proof of his facts. He shows nothing that correlates climate change with the facts that he was providing us. The only thing when I show you guys the 1,000-year reign in China, I showed you cosmic radiation. I showed you what happened 1,000 years ago, which, by the way, was a wolf minimum. I told you about cosmic radiation and how we are fluxed right now and how it interacts with particulates in the atmosphere and why we saw that rain and how it was possible. But all he says is that, nope, man-made global warming, that's what's causing it, without showing you the proof, without showing you the numbers. Well, and then now you probably have some Dr. Strong followers watching and says, where's your proof? Here is a great video that answers everything that was BS in that last video. Mr. Tony Heller.
Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com, reporting on the worst heat wave in a millennium. The Washington Post says that the June heat wave in the Pacific Northwest was a 1 in 1,000 year event. They said these events are becoming more common and they're caused by climate change, stupid. Unless people drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions in the coming years, this heat wave doesn't represent a new normal, but rather a something. And 2 days ago they said, we are fiddling while the world burns, floods, and something. And once again they talked about 1 in 1,000 year events. The message that they're trying to convey is that we're having unprecedented extreme weather, and it's going to get worse unless you stop using fossil fuels. So we read the propaganda, now let's look at the actual data. Our most accurate way of measuring the global temperature is from satellites, which have very good coverage of almost the entire Earth. Satellites show that global June temperatures were slightly below average, as they've been for 3 out of the last 4 months. Temperatures today are 0.2 degrees Celsius above the 1979 to 2000.
That is actually surprisingly low compared to all that record heat we've had in the Northwest and in the West Coast and the Southwest. Right now, globally, we're only at 0.2 above baseline. We're barely below baseline as it is. But to only rise 0.2 in a really hot month here in the Northwest shows you that there is just as much cold weather going on around this globe than there is hot.
An average. That doesn't sound very scary, and temperatures in both the Arctic and the Antarctic are below normal. South Africa is seeing record cold and snow. Now let's focus on the United States, where the 1 in 1,000 year heat wave is supposed to have occurred.
Where is it?
This graph from NOAA data shows when U.S. states set their all-time high temperature record.
Look at that.
No states have broken their all-time temperature record this year, but in 1936, 21 states did.
Now, Dr. Strong shows in his video that there are over 1,400 hot records broke, or 1,244 new record highs broken. But Tony is showing us something much different, and I'm looking at the charts here, and he's at least providing us data where he is getting this claim from.
Neither Washington nor Oregon broke their state temperature records, which were set in 1928 and 1898. Perhaps the writers of the Washington Post believe that 1928 was more than 1,000 years ago. The writing tends to be mathematically and scientifically illiterate. Now let's look at U.S. temperatures so far this summer.
Again,
this graph shows the June 1st to July 20th percent of United States Historical Climatology Network stations which reached 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. This year was the 4th lowest on record. Less than 3/4 of the United States has made it up to 90 degrees this summer, compared to 90 years ago when 96% of the country did. And as far as the percent of days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, this year has also been below normal, and just a little over half of 85 years ago. The average maximum temperature so far this summer has been just about average since 1895. Nothing about this summer looks like a 1,000-year heat wave. The Washington Post also says that we're burning up due to fossil fuels. But burn acreage so far this year in the United States has been well below the 10-year average.
Now, did you see that, folks? That's the other thing that the global warming folks are trying to do, is scare you about all the burning and all the fires. We are below the 10-year average right now. Fire season will be over in less than 2 months.
And less than half of 10 years ago. So far this summer, burn acreage in the United States has been about 1/20th of what it was 90 years ago in 1931. In 1931, there was a terrible drought and people were starving in the United States of America. People were starving in Texas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and other places because it was so dry and hot they couldn't grow any food. 1931 was a terrible year. Almost the entire country got over 90 degrees Fahrenheit that summer. Meanwhile, that same summer, China was having the deadliest floods on record. 50,000 square miles of China was flooded, including Wuhan. Millions of people died, and tens of millions became homeless. 1931 had record fires, record heat, record floods, and record starvation. The climate alarmists at the Washington Post want people to believe that the climate used to be safe and stable. But the historical record shows that the Washington Post is misinforming their readers. 1931 had the deadliest floods in history, but 1935 and 1939 were also in the top 5. And all of the 10 deadliest floods in world history occurred with carbon dioxide levels below the safe level of 350 parts per million. The Washington Post is selling snake oil. They claim that we can end bad weather by reducing CO2 emissions, but the historical evidence shows the exact opposite. Reality is that the U.S. climate and the global climate are much better than they were 90 years ago. Washington Post writers sit in their nice fossil-fueled powered offices. They're paid to generate propaganda which has the potential to eventually ruin their own lives. Toto understands that their best hope and the best hope for humanity is that people don't listen to Washington Post junk science and propaganda. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this insanity for the past 13 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, and Caesar on the web at realclimatescience.com.
Toto is also pulling back the curtain on Dr. Strong's channel as well, folks.
So Gavin Newsom is the governor of our largest state.
I'm sure most of you like Tucker, but we're not watching this right now. Sorry, that's a different show, right? Again, I have provided proof, information that explains to you what a grand solar minimum, solar cycle, 11-year solar cycle. I've given you the basics of how this works without judgment, without rhetoric, just the facts. Just the facts. Again, Mari, if you don't mind, if you can get the clip to that video. Actually, I'll do it. I'm going to put this link in the chat for you guys. Share this video. The next time you see someone who tells you that we are not in a grand solar minimum because a grand solar minimum means no sunspots for decades, show them this video. Hold on, I'm having problems here. Okay, I see in the chat, Dusty County Road says 1913, Zanesville, Ohio was flooded. 1913 was during the Gleesburg minimum. Also, Dayton, Ohio saw flooding through its downtown during that period of time as well. So, again, we can correlate the data with scientific empirical events, with sunspot activity, with ice cores. Everything that we claim on this channel when we talk about global cooling and crop loss is correlated with the article and is correlated with the data that follows that article. These aren't just guesses. These aren't things that to get us clicks and views. You can see that we're suppressed, folks. We have thousands upon tens of thousands of subscribers, and the views get suppressed. We get pushed down to the bottom because I think we do a good job of putting out the truth in layman's terms. And when you see people like Dr. Keith Strong lie about what a grand solar minimum is, they're panicking. Channels like us are starting to get through to people, and people are starting to see that the real science is in solar cycles, cosmic radiation, cloud nucleation, the jet stream and the solar wind connection and what that does. We provide explanations on why we're seeing the extreme weather, not shaming you for driving a car from your home to your job. And like Tony Heller says, these people are sitting in their cozy little fossil fuel powered offices writing propaganda because the propaganda is paying their bills. And if it was paying your bills, I don't know, maybe you would do the same, right? Depends on how much money you're getting. It's a sick world we live in, folks. Unfortunately, the people that have the most money always seem to win. And the message gets drowned out like ours. So tonight, if anything, this video was made to share with all your AGW friends who think people like Dr. Strong know what they're talking about. This is an example of another person who follows AGW, who claims to be a PhD in solar physics, and yet does not know the meaning of what a grand solar minimum. In fact, he acts like a grand solar minimum isn't even a real thing, yet NASA and NOAA, they acknowledge grand solar minimums. It's crazy pseudoscience over there, folks. They don't back it up with the facts. I want to thank Mari for making the video in the first place on the solar cycles. Again, the link is in the chat. I'll put the link also in the description of the video or the comment section so you can share that video or just share tonight's video because it's jam-packed. We got Tony Heller in the house. We got Mari in the house. And we got Dr. K. Strong, who likes to spread lies about GSM and their silly videos about cherry picking. It seems like the only person that cherry picks is Dr. Strong. He cherry picks the headlines and tries to scare people into believing that climate change is real and making jokes about it's so hot, ...
One was in about half a mile of our home.
2 tornadoes is because it's hot out, according to him. 17,000 people without power. That's fear-mongering. That's nothing. Anyway, I hope you guys got something out of the video. Thanks for tuning in tonight. Knife Collector, Richard, good seeing you out there. Melody, Jerome out there in New York as well. All the Sun, Rhea, good to see you. Spud Ruckus, long-time listener, first-time commenter. Same with Allison Briscoe. Matthew Bros, good to see you, my friend. There was a donation, and I want to thank that person. I'm scrolling back. There you are. 6 acres. Thank you very much. It says North Dakota wheat is dismal this year. Besides drought, now grasshopper infestation. This year sucks. As if you guys didn't have enough problems up there. I agree. Between cicadas, grasshoppers, storm damage, droughts, lack of rain. Yields are going to be low this year from the northern plain states. So, guys, thoughts and prayers for those farmers up there who work their butts off and sometimes barely are able to get together anything to help make the year a success. Hello to Dusty County Road as well. Good to see you in the chat. Guys, thank you for tuning in to this GSM special. We hope you learned something tonight. That's the object. We want to educate people. But it's frustrating when you have people out there who claim to be solar physicists and do not understand or even know the meaning of a grand solar minimum. All right, guys, tune in tomorrow morning for our solar update. Until then, we'll talk soon. Be safe, everyone.
Do you like this show? Give us a thumbs up. Want to support us more? Share to your favorite social media platform. Buy a t-shirt or become a Patreon. All links are in the description below.